We know service is good, but in this video we're going to dive a little bit deeper into why serving in our community is important. Of course, I brought back Devin Thorpe for this conversation. This is an awesome conversation. Let's start at the basic level to begin with. Why is serving in our community so important?
Well, it is for a variety of reasons, but at a fundamental level, one of the things that I would point out is that we all have a place in our brain that is activated by altruism, or that motivates us to do good for others. It is a distinctly human trait, as far as we can tell, but it's a really powerful need that we all have to do some good. And so doing good in the community is a really powerful way to sort of activate that part of the brain. And I realize everybody feels that a little bit differently, but virtually all of us feel that to some degree or another, and we can activate that part of our brains, even if it hasn't been active, by engaging in service in our community.
Okay, so I've got a question that will flip it around then. What are some of the negative impacts that I might experience if I'm not serving in my community?
Our lives, there are so many different people, and I'm certainly not a psychologist. You and I know one. You could ask him about this, but my experience and the research I've done suggests that there is really and truly a level of human satisfaction that comes from doing good, that if we don't have that in our lives, we're really missing out. All kinds of data suggests that people who do service and give service are happier in life, they're happier in their jobs. It's almost kind of magic. I don't want to dismiss for a minute, clinical depression and that sort of thing, but clearly one of the treatments for depression would be some service to get you out of your own head a little bit and focused on others.
So yeah, that's an awesome point to bring in. So even biologically or just physically, I will feel differently. I'll experience life in a different way, whether I'm serving or not.
And most people do. Most people are giving some of their time or money to a cause every year, and so we're really talking about a minority of people who don't do anything.
So I've got a question for you. Maybe you can help me out, because there's actually an area where I'm struggling, where, and it's just a mental struggle. I feel like I love to give, but I also judge quite a lot.
Well,
so when there's a panhandler, I'm really judgmental, and I don't like to give to panhandlers. People on the exit ramp on the freeway. And in my mind, I've actually made an intentional choice. Instead of giving to people that are on the street corners asking for money, but I'm going to make an intentional choice ahead of time that I'm going to be a good tipper for the waiter or waitress at the restaurant, for the Uber driver. And part of me still feels guilty for making that choice, because I want to give, and I love people that are giving of themselves. Obviously, the person at the restaurant or the Uber driver or other places that I can give a tip. I was just in New York. There was a tour guide that I went on, and they have these jobs because they want money. They're essentially holding up a sign saying, "Hey, I need money." And for some reason, I feel great, and I love giving to people in the form of a generous tip. But at the same time, I'm judging people on the street corner, not wanting to give them a tip, and I'm judging what they're going to do with the money and choices they made in their lives. So how can I?
So it's a really good setup, and I would point out that it's really an important lesson to be thinking about. Most of the people you're tipping, not all, some are quite well off, but many are not well off by your standard, right? They are in a situation where they may or may not have good health insurance. They may or may not have health insurance for their kids. Who knows the situations. So yes, being a fair, generous tipper is, I think, a moral good for sure. I commend you for doing that. Giving to panhandlers is very controversial. Sadly, there are some panhandlers who are not very hard up. If someone has a car and a clean, warm place to sleep every night and they're panhandling for an income, that offends me. Many of the homeless people I see around aren't actively panhandling. They get a variety of services. Some do, especially those that have habits that they need to feed apart from food. So yeah, it's very controversial. One of the things that I try to remember and encourage other people to remember is that they are all human beings. Whether it is a faker, a manipulator that is panhandling and going home to a warm bed every night, there's that. I try to remember they're human beings, and they may not have a much better way to maintain that lifestyle. In our economy, there are a lot of reasons people are displaced. I would like to think that they could do better, but on the other hand, you and I know here in Utah, you don't make $15 an hour slinging burgers at McDonald's. If you can make $15 an hour panhandling, our economy is screwed up as much as that person is, right? Anyway, so I try to see them all as human beings, even those who are addicted to heroin, and there are a lot, even here in Salt Lake, of course, who are struggling with terrible demons. Of course, we have some who are mentally ill. So one way to cope with that dilemma would be to also find an organization that supports homeless people in a way that aligns with your values. So there are all kinds of halfway houses and programs. So you can give to a homeless shelter. It helps people get off the street at night so they're not dying of exposure overnight. Every year in Utah, about 100 people, well, in Salt Lake, about 100 people in Salt Lake die from homelessness every year. By and large, that doesn't sound like a lot for a big city, but we're only talking about a population of chronically homeless people of 500 or 1,000 people. So like 10 or 20% of them are dying every year. It's a horrible, horrible lifestyle. Tragic. So there are all kinds of organizations that are providing food, shelter, job training, drug treatment, all kinds of things. And we can and should give to those organizations for sure. Sense, yeah. We benefit from eliminating homelessness. Homelessness in our community is a real scourge, and it's expensive. It has a negative impact on all of us. As uncomfortable as it is for you and I to see it, we have to remember it's 1,000 times worse to experience it. There are way too many people in our community who experience it for brief periods of time. That is clearly a problem of our economy that is sometimes a problem of our healthy economy, right? Rents go up, home prices go up, wages don't seem to keep up with inflation very well in our country. It's a country problem. And so we're seeing more and more people experiencing homelessness, not in a chronic sense like the folks we see downtown that haven't bathed in 6 months, right? It's the people who get evicted from their home because they can't keep up with rent. Something happened. Job interruption, they got laid off, health problem, medical problem, took all of their money. I mean, all kinds of different things that we would frankly say were no fault of their own, puts them out on the street. Now they have no money for a first and last month's rent and a deposit, and they're homeless, and they're in the system. So there are a lot of systematic things that we can be looking at in our communities. Perhaps the biggest to alleviate at least that form of homelessness is to look at affordable housing policies, and for landlords to look at carefully alternatives to eviction, because eviction in and of itself creates that cycle. And I think landlords can do more to avoid that some of the time. And the fewer evictions we have in our community, it will reduce dramatically these people that experience homelessness for 3 weeks or 3 months as they transition back into housing. And we need to eliminate those gaps through a variety of things.
I can see that as being a tough one. I'm not a landlord, but I have done a lot of filming for a real estate investing YouTube channel, and you know, there's a lot of risks that you have to mitigate in order to be profitable on your rental. And so, you know, to bring in that idea of, if you're going to evict somebody, they're going to become homeless, but if I don't, I'm going to go into the negative on this property. Right. Yeah. But that's a tough one.
The alternative isn't necessarily not to collect the rent. And I realize I'm a very small sample, but my parents had a rental place, and the tenant was 5 months behind. It was a disaster. It took us a year, but I went in, and I was a real jerk. I'm sure the tenant hates me, but we kept her in that apartment for 5 years. And of that 5 years, she probably paid the rent on time in 12 months out of 5 years. She was a candidate for eviction for for 48 months of 60 months. But we kept her in there, and yeah, the way I dealt with it was to be a jerk. I would go over and sometimes yell at her, get on the phone and yell at her. Horrible, but we kept her in that house for 5 years. There are alternatives to eviction. You know, you can, in some cases, do it, but you know, there are a variety of other policies that we need to be doing. We need, there are federal subsidies available for some housing, but cities probably need to be committing resources to this as well. They don't enough. Even in very liberal Salt Lake City, I don't think the city is doing nearly enough to create and incentivize affordable housing. Affordable housing can be profitable. We need regulations that make it easier for it to be profitable. That may mean code that allows for smaller dwelling units for more people. Trust me, a family of 4 is happier in 400 square feet than on the street. So we need to be really thoughtful about all of those issues and how they come together, because if we can keep people housed, there are all kinds of other peripheral community issues that can also be avoided, community problems.
Well, I appreciate this discussion. I appreciate the discussion on, you know, what are the benefits of serving in the community, and then just kind of expanding it that there are a variety of ways of doing it. And if there's, in my case, I brought up a way that, you know, I see a problem here, but I've got a conflict of how to help there. And you pointed out several different ways. You know, there's ways that we can help with housing, and even just, anyway, so I appreciate that perspective. Hopefully this video was helpful to you. Share your comments below on the benefits that you get from serving others, serving in the community. If you want to find out more information about Devin and the great things that he's doing, I'll put a link to your YouTube channel and website. I'll put that down below. So be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow.